Hey everyone, and welcome to a new look at data protection, cybersecurity, and compliance. Today's webinar is sponsored by Hitachi and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am truly thrilled to be your moderator for today's special event. First, though, there are a few housekeeping items that I do need to cover. First off is that we want your questions, and we encourage you to put them in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Take advantage of the opportunity to pick the brains of these experts from Hitachi. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is the first thing you want to do. If you have any audio, video, slide advancement issues, if that doesn't work, well, try it again. And if that still doesn't work, let us know and we will try to help you out as soon as possible. This is live internet and sometimes things do go wrong. Okay, next, take a look at the handout section, which is just to the left of the questions tab. There you're going to find a link to help you get started with learning more about how Hitachi can help you up-level your game. You'll also find a link to the ATM Decisions Group, which is a panel of IT decision makers like yourself that you can apply to join to participate in some more in-depth events and other opportunities. There, in that handout section, you'll also find a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of more upcoming events just like this one. And if you see something you like there, hey, sign up today after this event and you'll get more of this goodness. All right, finally today, we want to make one of you $250 richer. At the end of the event, we're going to be giving away a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Note that you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of the prize drawing can be found in that handout section. And with that, everyone, let's get to the main event. What do you say, huh? It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our presenters from Hitachi who are going to be having a fantastic roundtable discussion. They are Jeff Lundberg, Principal of Product Marketing, Terry Lewis, Strategic Technical Alliances, and David Green, an SVP for Global Strategic Partnerships with Hitachi Cyber. Now, Jeff is going to be kicking this off today. So, Jeff, I am going to turn the mic over to you right now.
Thank you so much, Keith, and thanks to everybody for joining us today for a new look at data protection with kind of a lens of cybersecurity and compliance. Before we dive in too deep, I just want to give our special guests today a chance to introduce themselves and go a little deeper into their backgrounds. David, why don't you kick us off here with a quick intro?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Jeff. So I'm David Antonio Green. I'm the Senior Vice President for Global Strategic Partnerships at Hitachi Cyber. Hitachi Cyber is actually one of the subsidiary companies with Hitachi, and the focus, as the name would suggest, is all things cybersecurity. I've been in the business now for the last 29 years, starting first as a programmer and then working my way up to the role of a CIO before pivoting over into sales and cybersecurity. I think this particular field is maybe the hottest field at this point in time. Yeah. And when you think about everything that we're going through as a society with cyber attacks and data breaches and the need for more stringent approaches to how organizations should behave, I think, we're in for quite an exciting time now and for the years to come. So I'm looking forward to engaging with my colleagues here on this call today with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Terry, why don't you give us a little bit on your background?
Thank you, Jeff. I guess we didn't get the memo to look as dapper as David there. Man, I feel underdressed. So, hey, what I can say is that, I get to head an awesome team of technologists here. So my team covers all the technology alliances around cybersecurity, cyber resiliency, data protection, and mainframe. And it's exciting. I mean, can we even say the word exciting? It is exciting, right? I used to think of bugs as something I squish or put a can of Raid against, but it's a new meaning to the word bugs and how we deal with it and help our customers stay in business. So it's a great time. We've been talking about this in Hitachi for many years about availability, resiliency, but the real world threats are bringing this to the forefront. So I think we've got some amazing solutions here, partnered with David and our sister companies to help our customers here.
Yeah, and I'm Jeff Lundberg. I actually started my IT career with Veritas way back in the day of the Veritas file system and net backup and backup exec, and people don't think it's that interesting, but just to see how all this space has evolved over the past, as David said, 20 years, right? You can see the gray starting to peak. It's starting to peak, but so much has changed from kind of the tape-based backup. Not that tape has gone away by any means. People have been saying, tape is dead for like 20 years and never dies because it's great, right? It's removable. It's sort of naturally air-gapped and so forth. But just to see it evolve over time from kind of that media server attached to a tape library and sending those tapes off to a defunct salt mine and things like that to active replication and clusters, and then cloud-based backups, and now we're into this world of cybersecurity. Just when you think you've got your arms around sort of those traditional practices, right? Everything's working fine now. Well, now you've got this cyber threat landscape out there where these attacks aren't just, oh no, me personally clicked a bad link in my Yahoo mail and now all of my kids' photos are locked up and somebody wants $50 to get my photos back. Now it's, they're going after configuration files of enterprise server environments. They're going after the backups themselves, right? Attacking the very things that organizations would use to recover in these types of scenarios. The cost is going up. The sophistication of these attacks are going up. You've got things like ransomware as a service. You've got AI being used to generate these things. Like, you don't even have to be, the 90s movie black hat hacker in the basement with sunglasses on in the dark and green lights and hack away at the keyboard. But, like, David, you're obviously in this space every day. Like, what are the kinds of conversations that you're having with, kind of either the business decision makers or the technical folks, because it's on everybody's radar these days?
It is on everyone's radar. And I think we're at a stage now where people are starting to feel overwhelmed. And I've never seen burnout at a rate like I'm seeing it at this point in time. A lot of my friends that I would have grown up in the ICT world with back when I was on the operational side of things, they've still continued their careers in that area, and they're telling me now that they want out. They would prefer to go be a barrister at Starbucks because they're just tired. It's too much, and it's almost as if every day there's another one and another one and another one. And my fear, and I'm speaking on behalf of Hitachi Cyber now, the fear that we also have is that there's a state of numbness that's starting to set in. So much so that persons are like, it's like, okay, it's a fait accompli. It's gonna happen to me. So why even bother? And I don't think we should throw our hands up and just give up. I think we still have an opportunity to push back. And yes, the cost of the threats are going up. The damage that's associated with the threats are also going up. One need only look closely at what happened recently with United Health. I mean, that is a case study in and of itself. There's a $22 million ransom that was paid, and one would think it stops there. Unfortunately, it doesn't. By last count, they would have spent another $870 million at the end of the first quarter of this calendar year just to do remediation work and restore systems, etc. But there's a snowball effect that's still going to be associated with that, because you still have all of the patients and all of the individuals who have been affected by this. You still have the SEC and the other regulatory bodies who are going to no doubt come and want to have a very microscopic conversation. And if anyone saw the CEO's statements when he was before the congressional committee, it wasn't a pretty sight. So we're at a time now where, for corporations not just individuals, but for corporations, we need to start taking this really, really seriously. And we need to start looking at cybersecurity not just as something that I'm throwing technology towards, but you know what? I'm old school. Let's go back to the old school approach. You've got three components in any system. You've got the people, you've got your processes, and you've got your technology. And I think we're getting too caught up around the technology piece, thinking that that's going to save us. And
Yeah.
we're not paying attention closely to the people and the process side. That for me is summed up into one word: culture. We need to start building a culture within an organization or within organizations where we take a security first approach with everything. And little by little, if we can start to get that going, I think we can get organizations to lift themselves to the next level where even if the threat actor were to come with something new, it's not going to phase them that much because it's like, okay, we're already in a mindset that this is the paradigm that we have to operate in. It's just normal course of business for us. And we have a foundation that has been set, but we will adjust to suit as we go along and we'll keep refining it so that we keep getting better and better and stay a step ahead of the attacker. So that's how we're seeing it today. And this is what we're communicating to the clients that we're interacting with.
Yeah, and Terry, I know we've talked in the past about this concept of like fighting while wounded, right? Just keeping things running so that you can recover the stuff in the background, but it's not an existential crisis. It's still not, party poppers and champagne if something bad happens, but taking it back to that level of, oh man, a drive failed or my site network connection is down. Let's fail over somewhere else. Maybe just, talk a little bit about what people are doing to kind of get to a state where it isn't the sky is falling and, being able to recover quickly, things like that.
Yeah, Jeff, you brought up a great point, right? And I loved what David just mentioned, right? It's a cultural and a mindset change. I think customers are beginning to realize this. So in the fighting while wounded, right? The most customers understand, in fact, I just got off a call with a very, very large global bank, and they realize they've spent a lot of money, but they're still a little bit paranoid. We've got these security front end detections but truly, am I truly prepared? And I think as David mentioned, most of them recognize I've got all these cybersecurity, but the bad guy's going to get through somehow. And how prepared am I, right? And now we pivot from cybersecurity into a cyber resiliency. So I expect that I'm going to have all these defenses. I'm going to try to stop the bad actors at the perimeter, but they're going to get through at some point. I need to have these layers of detection, basically alerting, so that I can bring my automated functions and features start to recover at scale quickly. So I think there's this understanding. Yes, I've got all these measures, but I know I'm going to attack, but I'm still going to try to keep the guys at bay, keep recovering my environments, keep going in business. So that's where we see customers pivoting towards, right? They know they have to build this ecosystem from top to bottom. And I think that's where, Hitachi, in partnership with Hitachi System Security, we've got this great combination because we're not just about here's another block storage with replication, immutability.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's table stakes now, right? Customers saying, how can you help me accelerate my capability to respond, right? And then have all of the let's say evidence and everything to kind of handle all my forensics and all of the things that I need to do from a regulatory compliance perspective. So this is as you mentioned, Jeff, this is actively in the minds of all our customers now. They're all going back and relooking, right? It used to be a checkbox. Oh yes, I had data protection, I had my tape sent off, but they recognize that that is not, we're beyond checkboxes, right? The backup systems are great in the old days when I had a fat finger corruption, lost the files, but now this could be a mass event that could take down my entire environment, my infrastructure. And I mean down for days. I'm talking about mass recovery. And most of them have tested the environments, but they've not necessarily tested the environments for mass recovery situation like this while keeping in business, right? So I think that's where we are. And I see our customers pivoting from now. Let's, instead of being afraid on the defensive, let's go on the offensive. Take the fight to the bad guys.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
And, the other piece of this too is, it's not just the the immediate impact of the attack itself. Now you've got regulations cropping up. I think the one that everybody is off of everybody's mind right now would be like the DORA, Digital Operational Resiliency Act out of the EU, and similar regulations coming from different geographies, countries, maybe even industry level things, right? DORA specifically is looking at the financial services industry, right? Can you process sales transactions? Can you clear stock trades at the end of the day? You can't have certain amounts of downtime, or you're going to have regulators in your in your environment poking around with a microscope and doing things like that. But you could see that spreading to things like healthcare or government services, utilities, right? As these threats get more sophisticated, and it's not always, again, just somebody in their basement. These are full-time businesses for these hackers, and some of them are even state actors. So,
absolutely,
when we look at it through that lens of, it's not just my own self-preservation as an organization, but now I've got regulators crawling around and making this an even more painful situation for customers. I don't know, David, if you're hearing much from, kind of the EU side of the world with their, issues around not just sort of the blocking and tackling of regulatory compliance, but now these new flavors that are coming in around operational resilience.
So you're absolutely right about that, Jeff. And it's funny that you should bring this up, because this morning my wife and I, we were just conversing over breakfast, and I told her that I'm going to be doing this session today, and she said, David, always remember the iceberg effect. People see just a tiny bit on the surface, but they don't know what's actually below at the bottom. And I think this is why now, when the slide says compliance is non-negotiable, literally that's the bottom of the iceberg. It's so much is going on down below. If you're not tuned in, you're going to get clobbered. So to your point, Jeff, we've got DORA, the Digital Operational Resiliency Act, which is an EU regulation. And even though it's not in effect yet in 2024, it's going to come into effect from the 17th of January. And I don't think that a lot of institutions, especially in the Americas, are ready for this, because this is going to require them not just to do a checkbox to say that I did a pen test, I did a vulnerability assessment, etc. This is going to force you to be operationally resilient at this point in time. So if you had a malware outbreak, how do you treat with that malware outbreak while, as Terry said, fighting while wounded, keep the business going and still interact in some meaningful way with the customers and the businesses that you're interacting with? And on top of that, and now the environment is getting really super complicated when it comes on to compliance, because in addition to DORA, now there's the EU Cyber Resilience Act, and it's like one act after another act after another act that's coming out. And while all of that is going on, let's come back into the Americas. And in the US now, the SEC is saying, okay, I'm going to force you to step your game up, because now you have a disclosure requirement wherein you have to materially disclose to me within, I think it's either 3 or 4 days, the moment you detect that there was something wrong, you've got to say something. And then when you take into consideration that as you go from industry to industry, whether you're in financial services or in healthcare, everybody has their own compliance requirement. With healthcare, it's HIPAA. With banking, especially in New York, there's this new one that many persons probably didn't hear of, the New York Department of Financial Services. Then you've got the SEC, as I mentioned before. And then to sum all of that up, you still have the White House coming out with their own executive order that came out in 2021 and then got revamped in 23, saying, hey, you've got to take this thing seriously or else. And I don't think folks need to wait on a compliance requirement to push them in a particular direction. I mean, no one wants to be fined. No one wants to be dragged in front of the public because, data was lost and, now you're out of business. So you've got to say, okay, for me, the way I'm looking at it is, what's the bare minimum that I would need to have my company still run, even if something were to happen? It's almost like risk planning 101.
Yep.
And if I can figure that out, then I can work backwards. What do I need to do just to ensure that I can deliver the bare minimum? That's step number one. Then I can get to step number two. How do I build on top of that minimum and take it to the next level? And then it's almost like a cycle that I need to go through. And I keep review, update, keep going and improving on it each and every time. Because if we don't do it, I'm afraid we're going to get to a point where we're simply running the business for the compliance and the regulatory guys. And that's no way to do business.
David, you're
Larry,
so
I see
right.
you nodding furiously.
Yeah,
I think you
no,
have something you.
I'm so excited what David said, right? Because it's a lifestyle. It's got something where everyone in the company has to feel that they're an owner in this process and take this to heart. Because if you don't live and breathe this every day, like I said, David, this is a constantly changing landscape. We got to evolve and change and respond to that. It's not a static environment, right? So one of the things, as you mentioned around this, David, I'm seeing this a change in the mentality, right? I mean, when I was involved in this with companies 5, 10 years ago, I started to talk about things like understanding the value of your data, the life cycle of your data. Nobody cared about that because it took too much work. It was hard. It was easy to throw assets at it, right? I could go to Best Buy, buy a few more
Just
drives.
more storage. It's cheap. Yeah.
Cheap, right? But now it's with all the regulatory and compliance stuff, you got to understand, what am I at risk of losing? What's the cost of that data? Not only that, a lot of, as we've seen, like the fastest growth of data is in this unstructured space. It's like phenomenally growing, like 20% year over year, and it's chewing up. The problem is now I've got this massive, massive footprint that's exposed there to all the bad actors. So how do I reduce that footprint? If I have proper data management and spend the effort, and that's going to be an effort, and again, it's continuous effort in classifying, identifying my data, then I know how long things need to exist, where they need to exist, how much of protection and compliance requirements they have, and stuff that's just purely junk. There's probably a whole bunch of stuff on, I don't want people to know about me that's out there. I want it deleted and gone. So I think I'm seeing this change, right? Because as you put these numbers here, it's massive. But if I can reduce my exposed unstructured data front by 40, 50%, think of how much I'm going to save in not just in all of my IT costs, but all of my compliance exposure, data management exposure. It's just tremendous savings. But it's going to take some effort. And then something, as David mentioned, I got to continuously work at this. Continuously. This has got to be ongoing, and it's got to be built into every part of your infrastructure, of your application stack, of your overall, as you bring things to market, it's got to be in there, embedded.
Correct.
Yep.
And you know what, guys? I don't think that this is difficult to do, because let me step back for a second from the life that the three of us live today and go back into my banking world. There was a point in time where we went through a transformation in banking because we were concerned about money laundering and the financing of terrorism. So that's when the KYC, or know your customer, came about. And it became painful in the very beginning. You're going into the bank, you need to open an account, and they're asking you everything. When were you born? Where were you born? What's the state of your liver? Well, I'm being facetious, but everything. You're just asking so much. And at first it was like, why do you need to know all of this? But there was a reason behind it. We need to know who you are so that we can validate that at the end of the day. When Jeff sends you money, David, this isn't money that you're laundering on behalf of Jeff, or this isn't some kind of terrorist financing that you're doing on his behalf. And over time, what happened? We all got adjusted to it. We acclimatized to it, and we started to perhaps predict what would be asked, and we were prepared for it. And I'm thinking now, Terry, to your point, given this explosion in unstructured data that we have today, why are we not being more stringent in the way that we're approaching, similar to how the banks used to do it from a KYC perspective? Why is Terry needing access to this data? Okay, he does, great. Okay, for how long does he need access to this data? Okay, fantastic. And as soon as he's done, did someone go back and remove his access? And these are like the little things that we need to go back, which is why I said you need to go back to the basics, especially around the process piece. If we go back to that, I think we can start to smooth things out. Because why is it that data is still leaking out into the wild? Because what? someone gave someone access and then forgot to take the access back, and then it's just sitting there and the threat actor comes in. I think that's inexcusable.
Yep. Or they put data in the cloud to do some, temporary workload, and then they forget to delete the bucket. Or, we're in this more mobile, edge-centric type of world where, I might have access to things on a mobile device that I'm allowed to see while I'm in the US. But if I go to, a Commonwealth country, or I travel overseas somewhere, I might not have rights to access that data anymore. And how do you enforce that? Do you have geofencing enabled on your mobile devices and all that kind of it's just gotten so much more complicated, especially with the proliferation of, not just mobile users and, remote and branch offices, but now you've got these attack vectors that could be webcams. They could be devices on container trucks or ships or whatever the case may be. Terry, go ahead.
No. You're right, Jeff. It's that with the proliferation of the edge devices, the points of attack and infiltration are just immeasurable, right? It's almost impossible to stop it. You can put it in, but you're right. How do I build the structures and the process that I can have an audit trail? Those are kind of the key things we're still seeing. Is a lot of it's not there in place yet. There's always good intention to start it, but we see a lack of that in there. And I think exactly what David mentioned. How do I trace that? How do I follow? How then do I create a workflow alerting it? Hey, this has not happened, right? Going back to the point, when we bring all these things to market, as customers bring new applications, they bring great, whole bunch of applications they want to test and develop and make multiple copies. But you got to clean up after yourself. When you're done with these things, what do I do with all of these data sets, right? If I used to leave my stuff hanging around the house, I would get smacked by mom. You got to clean up after yourself, right? So, so cleaning up after yourself, that's almost it's got to be almost a habit in our business. People are going to take ownership of the data, the value of what they've produced, and said, okay, does it need to be still here? Where can I put it? How long does it need to be around? And kind of that mindset, that change David mentioned, it's got to be that's going to be the biggest internal change. Is going to bring us the biggest bang for our buck, and limiting the access that the bad actors are going to have to get into our enterprise.
And Terry, you're absolutely right. And that's why a security first approach, or security by design, has to be embedded within the culture, and it has to permeate. If you think about it, we're long past the days when the data center used to be physically enclosed in a little room inside, the fifth floor of the building. And then, we moved away from that, and then we started to embrace the concept of the data center. And you have all the data centers all over the place. And, my data goes across some kind of encrypted channel into the data center. Now, we're in a world today where the modern data center is both something physical, and then there's the cloud. And in many instances, I have data in the cloud. I have data still on-prem. I still have data in a data center somewhere. And I have it scattered all over the place with all of these different touch points. But somehow people are losing control of where things are at. And to the point that Jeff made, I am a department of 2, and I have access to critical information, and I need to run some kind of analysis. For some strange reason, someone thinks it's a bright idea to take core data for the company and stick it into some analytical tool that's running in AWS, just so that they can quickly do what they need to do. And then, as you rightfully said, the habit of not going back to clean up behind yourself is not there. So now that the project is over, I've handed over the report, I've moved on to something else, completely forgetting that, oh, wait a second, I've got data sitting over here in a corner, which I probably never even told IT that I was putting the data there in the first place. So now I have all of these touch points. And then when the event occurs, we are like alarmed. Why did this happen? Well, you broke your process.
Yep. Well, and even just a user not being nefarious, but just trying to get something done. Right? The presentation's too big. It won't go through Outlook. When I try to share it with OneDrive, it only lets me share it internally, but I've got to get it to this channel partner tomorrow. I'm just going to put it in my personal Dropbox and let them pull it down. But, heaven forbid that has some kind of personally identifiable information in it. Maybe it's got some pricing. right? You run afoul of like an internal controls policy, or even worse, something like GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations. Like it's a nightmare, and it's so complicated. And even when we as Hitachi talk about our solutions, like there's a lot of moving parts here. And yeah, it's great we can bring it under one vendor and we can do all the support and make it easier to kind of purchase, deploy, consume as you see fit. But just trying to put all of this together is not as it's not a Lego set with a clean set of instructions. It's an IKEA piece of furniture, and you only got the instructions in a language you don't understand, right? And I heard a quote or read it. I don't remember where it came from, but it struck me as you guys were going back and forth earlier. And it's, imagine a farmer who's, they're growing grain and they're keeping it in bags, and they notice that, there's just mice everywhere eating all of their grain before they can get it sold or used or what have you. Like, is that a mouse problem or is it a grain storage problem? I could put out all the mouse traps in the world and poison baits or whatever. The mice are going to reproduce faster. They're going to get smart to the traps and go around them. But maybe the answer is really just, hey, maybe I should put this grain inside of some kind of metal container that the mice can't get to, right? And so that's kind of where we as Hitachi Vantara kind of look at the starting point for a lot of this, right? And what it ultimately comes down to is it's the data that they're after. I can buy more servers, I can relicense applications, but it's the data that is valuable. That's where the IP lives. So if we can get that data into an environment where the storage itself is incredibly reliable, it doesn't just go down for no good reason, where it's secured with things like encryption and access controls and intelligent data management tools, and perhaps most importantly, and oftentimes overlooked, this idea of immutable storage, where I write the data once, it can't change. If somebody tries to overwrite it, it simply spawns a new version. Yeah, that new version is encrypted with a key you don't own, but those older versions can't be touched. And so that's, kind of where we see the right place to start as, let's at least build that bank vault, build that castle key, build that bunker for your data so that even in the worst case scenario, you might lose an hour of data. Yes. But you've got all of your historical stuff that you can come back to, whether you're doing that in, a digital clean room or, you're just spinning up some stuff at a colo facility until you can get the regulators and the investigators out of your data centers and get back to regular operation. But Terry, I know you work extensively with some of our like data protection software partners like Veeam and Commvault and Veritas. And, I think there's a great synergy there between the backup applications, making those regular copies, looking to make sure there's no malware in them, and coupling that with that immutable, reliable, secure storage. So maybe just spend a couple minutes there.
Absolutely, Jeff. I mean, like anything, right? That's the foundation. If your foundation is not rock solid, whatever you build upon it, well, you're building it in a house of cards. It's going to collapse, right? Yep. And so what we're building is that solid foundation. Now, it doesn't matter how much I pile up on it. That foundation is going to be still standing. So I see our core infrastructure components, whether it's our object storage with immutability, 15 gazillions of nines of availability, our guarantee of storage, that it doesn't fail. That's the bedrock, the foundations. Now, when I layer all of the different ISV solutions upon it that protect it from a data protection, from an archival perspective, the customer knows that this stuff on the back end, where it's stored, where it's recovered from, is always going to be there, always going to be up and running. And when I do need it, and there's a good chance you're going to need it at some point, it's going to be there. It's going to serve the data back to the applications, right? And so that's the key thing that we've worked with these ISVs, and they'll love whether it's an S3 object integration, whether it's through our fiber channel capabilities. It doesn't matter what, to have that back end, the immutable snaps, the object storage immutability, that's the key so that the ISVs can go tell the customers, we've got a great solution in the front end with all your data management, data protection capabilities, and it sits on a bedrock of solidly available, storage fund solutions, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
love it.
kind of like, oh, go
I
ahead,
love
David. Sorry.
I love it, Tara, because we're talking about being unbreakable, which means that even if something happens, you can still continue. And even though you had a little bit of dropout a while ago, it was unbreakable. It was still going. But there's something that came to me while both you and Jeff were talking. There's an old quote that I remember from way back when. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. And as I'm looking at this and we're talking about, Jeff said it, it's the data, it's the data, it's the data.
God. Yes.
Go back old school. When I was doing my undergrad in computer engineering, I remember one of my professors said, there's three things that you always need to remember about data. It needs to be kept confidential. You need to ensure that it's always available when you need it. But more importantly, once you've written the data, you need to maintain its integrity. And this is something that we all need to remember as persons who are interacting with data on a daily basis. Those three things are key. You keep it confidential. You make certain that you can get to it when you need it so it's available. And no matter what happens, once the data is written, you got to maintain that integrity. And that if we are able to do that, that's how we are able to maintain that unbreakable nature that we're talking about here. And everything else
right.
just
And I'll add
everything else just becomes the gravy that's added to that.
Yeah. Well, I'll add maybe the three D's you had. I'm going to add a fourth D, deletion. So there was this recent, not too long ago actually, it was a telco where it was secure, everything is kept, but they had basically millions of customers. But they, when a customer leaves after a certain period, they're supposed to delete all of the customer. Well, they did not delete all the information for all the customers who had left. They got breached. So not only was the PII information of all of their current customers exposed, but customers who had left decades ago, which they failed to delete and remove that information, was all exposed and sold in the dark web. So, now if you don't have that proper data retention policy, the deletion policy, combined with the other three Ds that you mentioned about data, that's a major exposure. And I think customers are beginning to pay attention. Rules like Garandora and all of the other data retention policies are going to start to drive that. And that's where we go into like the partner ecosystem for compliance. So being able to have that intelligence, data scrubber to go in and look at the data, understand the type of data, value data, the history of the data, when it was created, and the type of data, and said, this shouldn't be here anymore. Put policies to wipe it out, right?
Yeah, and we kind of touched on like a lot of the technological aspects, but as David was saying earlier, there's process and people here too. And I think that's really where Hitachi's great with the technology, the hardware, the software, those kinds of things. But Hitachi Cyber really brings in those other components around, like you were saying earlier, these security guys, they burn out, or the right people can be hard to find, and they're expensive, and they can go from company to company and demand better compensation packages along the way. And for a lot of organizations today, they don't even know where to start. So do they want like a perpetual kind of contract with somebody, or maybe they just want to get some help with like, hey, where am I at today? Like, where am I strong? Where am I weak? What do I need to fix? Like, how does Hitachi Cyber kind of come into this picture and help customers either on the, kind of one-time engagement, like let's do some pen testing for you, or let's do a cyber assessment, all the way over to, hey, we'll monitor your environment 24/7, 365. We'll, help you with incident response, things like that. Just give us a little bit more on that portion.
So that's actually the backbone of the business that we're in. And one thing we've always stressed to the prospects and the clients that we work with is, one, you're not alone. You can't think that you're alone in this. And if you do try to go at it alone, you're going to burn yourself out. So you do need someone like a big brother that you can lean on. And I'd like to say that we've positioned ourselves to be that big brother to our clients. Our tagline is that we'll help you confidently navigate the world of cybersecurity so you can sleep easy at night. And that's what everyone wants to do. They want to sleep easy. We've been in the business now for 25 years, and in the 25 years, we've taken an agnostic approach to cybersecurity, wherein we're not focused on the technology. We're focused on getting the people and the processes right, knowing fully well that the technology changes rapidly. And Terry said something important. He said foundation. That word is important. Once you get the foundation set, then all you need to do is make the agile adjustments based on the environment. But the foundation is the foundation. And you only go back when you build a house, you don't build a house and tear up the foundation every 2 years. You lay a strong foundation and then you put the walls up. You may redecorate, you may move things around, you may open up a room, you may shrink a room. You don't go back and dig the foundation unless something seriously goes wrong. So it's the same approach that we take at Hitachi Cyber with our prospects and with our customers. Now, from a business perspective, Jeff, to your point, we do offer two lines of business. One would be the traditional consulting services. So penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, incident response services, cloud assessments, governance, risk compliance, and a full cadre of consulting type engagements. One of which will help an organization figure out where am I today and what do I need to do to get to the next level and to the level that comes after that from a maturity perspective. The other side of the house comes with the more tactical. It's the 24/7 eyeball and where I can do the detections and I can do the response. Now, this comes in handy from two perspectives. The first one is being proactive. We get to see what the threat landscape looks like right now. So we see what's happening in an industry, we see what's happening in a geography, we can see what's happening to contemporaries in the same space. And then we can take that information and come back to the customer that we're working with and say, hey, here's what we're seeing outside. Let's take a quick look inside and see if there's any weaknesses that you have based on the threats that we're seeing, wherein if one of those weaknesses becomes exploited, you could be tomorrow's news. So that's us being proactive. And then when something actually goes wrong, you want to know that you have someone in the firefight, in the trench with you. And then, we're there with the customers to help take them through the process and bring them out to the other end to ensure that the business can continue. And we've done it successfully for 25 years. Knock on wood, I'm really grateful for what we've been able to accomplish and what we've been able to do with the customers. We do have a global presence, which kind of matches with Hitachi Vantara. We've got 4 SOCs around the world. One is in Canada, there's one in Switzerland, there's one in India, and there's one in Tokyo, and we're already making strides to get a 5th one spun up in the US. We've got a full cadre of certified experts. Some of them are academic experts going all the way up to the PhD level, and they also carry the industry credentials. And then we have a lot of the guys with the industry credentials, whether they're a certified ethical hacker, a certified privacy professional, and the list goes on and on. It's really cool the way the company started back in 1999 as a boutique firm and got the attention of Hitachi, got acquired by Hitachi in 2015. And now we're making another step wherein the company is rebranding and now being positioned as Hitachi Cyber. And that name in and of itself resonates a level of comfort, resonates a level of confidence. And we didn't just arbitrarily pick that name. We spent some time working with a branding agency out of the US. They interviewed a lot of our customers and even spoke to prospects and, threw out different ideas to them. And what they came back with was, we like this company because they're not trying to force us to buy a piece of technology and tell us that the technology that we're using today is bad. What they want to do is help us manage the technology that we're using today and get that return on the investment. And only when the technology gets to its end of life, or it gets to its end of usefulness for me, the customer, then they say, okay, here's some characteristics that you want to go look at. Here are the different choices or options that are out there on the market based on your budget. Go talk to your value added reseller and then go in a particular direction. We're here to support you. But for us, I go back again, it's all about foundation, 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 foundation. If we drive the culture, if we get you to adopt a particular mindset, and this mindset, by the way, it's not just at the tactical level, with your day-to-day IT engineers or your networking guys or even your storage guys. This is going up to the level above them. This is management. And then this is going to the level above them, the executives, the chiefs of the company. And then that's going to the level above them, which is the board, because we understand fully that for the culture to permeate and the change that's required to happen, it has to go, the messaging has to start at the top and go all the way down to the guys who actually execute, and then it has to bounce and go back up again. So when you create that, it's almost like an information loop. When you create that loop, the guys are executing, the board can then come back and at their regular intervals say, hey, show me some KPIs. How are we doing? How many threats did we avoid? Where are we at? How are we doing from a maturity perspective? Oh, you need more funding? Okay, I'm approving more funding for you. So it's a loop that you go through, and we're able to help the customer figure out, first of all, where am I now? What are the known knowns, the known unknowns? Where am I at today? So let's try and figure that out. And once we have a good sense of what's going on in the environment, we can quickly remediate and harden that environment, because nobody wants to know that you have a problem and there's no solution. So, let's harden the environment. And once we harden that, then let's come up with some kind of structure. How are you going to govern this? And governing cybersecurity is not just about, I'm going to adopt the NIST framework and it's the end all be all, or I'm going to write some policies, acceptable use, etc. It's about, how do I intertwine cybersecurity with the business? Because if I get this figured out right, I can enable the business to move faster. What if I am at the point where I'm about to do a merger or an acquisition? What if I'm at the point where I want to engage with a third party and it's going to help me scale the business? If I don't get the cyber piece right, I could run into problems, because the person that I'm about to integrate with, maybe they are going to be that attack vector that the threat actor can now use to get into my environment. So these are things that we have to figure out. And then finally, we can do the whole monitoring bit that I spoke about. But what's the important piece is, when something happens, and it will, we can respond to it, and then we can start the process all over. It's just like a life cycle that you go through. I'm going to tie off what I'm saying here by saying this. With cybersecurity, and I've heard it said before, and I shake my head every time I hear it, there are some folks who will say that, I can sell you a magic pill and it's going to solve your problems and you will never, ever, ever be attacked again. And I chuckle whenever I hear that, because that's not true. Something is going to happen. And maybe you're not going to have a cyber attack, but maybe you may have a user who will inadvertently do something. Accidents do happen. So the goal here for every organization, and that's why when you spoke about resiliency, Terry, this is important. The goal is, let me be ready. Let me be ready in the event something goes wrong. But let me be ready in such a way that whatever the risk is, it's minimized and I can keep the wheels turning. I can keep the wheels turning. Whether it's ensuring that I have my foundation set, and then when I get down to my storage layer, something goes wrong, I can quickly recover with confidence. I can recover and start my business, just keep the business going. That's where we have to get to. That's where we have to
100% agree, David. And to me, one thing we've seen, and I think you said, right, we want our stakeholders, our customers to be able to sleep at night. And that really comes from an executable, practiced plan with predictable outcomes, right? The 3P: practice, predictable, and performant, right? And that's really what, at the end of the day, we want to be able to deliver to our to our customers, right, to our partners, is the ability for them to sleep at night, saying, it doesn't matter what happens. I know I can stop them, but if we do get through, I have this practice, performant, and predictable plan. I can come back. I can keep my business going. I can protect the key information of my customers who rely on it. So, and that's what we want our partners and customers to know, that we have this capability now. And it doesn't matter where you are in your journey, we can help you at any point. Say, this is where I start. That's perfect.
Absolutely. Well, I think we are reaching the end of our time today. So I just want to say thank you to you gentlemen for your time and insights today. I'll say thank you to Keith for setting us up with our session today, and turn it back over to you to close us out.
Ball's back to you, Keith.
Thank you so much for having us, Keith.
Oh, it was my pleasure to have you, everyone. I mean, what an amazing discussion today, folks. I learned so much about cybersecurity, and also about how Hitachi can help you stay safe in this wild, wild west that we call the internet. I want to thank Jeff, Terry, and David for putting together a fantastic presentation. We appreciate their time so much today. I want to mention that we do not have time for questions right now. We're coming up close to the top of the hour, but Hitachi will be following up on all questions that you ask. So have no fear, you will be hearing from them. And as I said, we're just about wrapped here, but we do have one more thing to do, and that is to give away the Amazon gift card. As I mentioned up top, you do have to be present during the entire event to be eligible. And the winner of the $250 today is Greg Middleton from Texas. Congratulations to you, Greg. We will be in touch to get you your card, so sit tight on that. And with that, folks, we are wrapped. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Hitachi for making this event possible. And thanks, as always, to you attendees for being here, for your great questions, your interest in this topic. I love spending part of my day with you. Can't wait to see you in the next one. That concludes today's event, folks. Have a great rest of your day.